At 10, Donald Trump says he's more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory in what he hopes will be a quick conflict with Iran. Earlier, in an interview, he suggested the war was very complete, pretty much, and later claimed it was a short-term excursion.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all.
Mixed messages from President Trump today, suggesting the war may be over soon, but not until Iran is totally defeated.
Oil prices rose to well over $100 a barrel today before falling back sharply as the war with Iran brings global economic uncertainty. And that could affect everyone, with the Chancellor warning inflation might rise. Australia grants 5 members of the Iranian women's football team humanitarian visas after fears for their safety.
And also on the programme tonight, the devastating fire which destroyed a Victorian building leaves Glasgow Central Station closed for at least another day. And the King says the Commonwealth is a force for unity in a fragmented world, in a message for the annual Commonwealth Day service in London.
On BBC London, MPs demand a meeting with the Travelodge boss after a woman was sexually assaulted in her hotel room by a man who'd been given a key card by staff.
Hello to you from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, as Donald Trump is holding his first news conference since the start of the Middle East war against Iran. We'll bring you the latest lines when we get them, but earlier in an interview with the American network CBS, he said he thought the conflict was ahead of schedule and very complete, pretty much. He was speaking on a turbulent day for oil prices, which surged to more than $100 a barrel, its highest one-day spike in 6 years. Now it's fallen sharply back to around $90, but the knock-on effect for now still means higher prices for millions of ordinary consumers around the world. In a moment, we'll have more on what it all means for the UK, as the Chancellor warns inflation is likely to rise. In the war itself, there have been more US and Israeli attacks, including on what appears to be another Iranian naval vessel bombed just across the water from our position here in the heart of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, let's go live now to Sarah Smith at the White House for our top story tonight. Sarah.
Yeah, so as you were saying, Clive, Donald Trump was first today speaking in a telephone interview with our news partner CBS, sounding as though he did want to wrap things up in the Gulf fairly quickly. He was asked if things will end soon. He said, "I don't know, it depends." But he also said that he thinks that the war is very complete pretty much, and also very much ahead of schedule, lauding the fact that the Iranian Navy and Air Force have been very severely damaged. He says it's almost impossible for them to fight back from the US. And then just in the last hour, he gave a speech in Florida where he started off by saying he didn't want the conflict to last very long in the Gulf. Have a listen to this.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. How good is our military, right? Amazing. How good. Short-term. Short-term.
Yeah, so short-term excursion does sound as though he doesn't think that the conflict will last very much longer. But then he went on to say that although he believes the US has already won in many ways, they haven't won enough yet, and that they need to go forward to achieve ultimate victory. Have a listen to another clip from that same speech.
Their terrorist leaders are gone. We're counting down the minutes until they will be gone. Think of it. We had leaders and they're gone. Then we had new leaders and they're gone. And now nobody has any idea who the people are that are going to be the head of the country, and will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. As
utterly and decisively defeated mean? Well, that's probably up to Donald Trump. He has suggested all sorts of different ways that this conflict might end, whether that is with regime change, whether with the unconditional surrender of the Iranian regime as he's demanded, or simply at the point at which he thinks they no longer pose a military threat to the US or to any of its Gulf allies. So he can probably declare victory whenever he wants. But talking tonight about wanting to see the enemy totally and utterly defeated doesn't sound as though he's ready to wrap things up right away.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Smith there, our North America editor at the White House. Well, the G7 group of leading industrialized nations held crisis talks today after the roller coaster of oil prices surging, then falling back. The spike was prompted by falling oil supplies due to the war. But Donald Trump's comments tonight seem to have calmed the markets. Faisal Islam, our economics editor, reports now on an astonishing day for global finance.
Chaos in the oil fields across the Gulf, and on the seas in the world's main artery for the flow of energy, and absolute chaos on the oil markets too. The price of crude oil spiralling above $100 a barrel early this morning, up to $119, and then fell back even lower than Friday's close to $85 on President Trump's comments that the war was very complete. This followed an emergency meeting of G7 finance ministers, including the Chancellor, that sought to deal with then surging prices.
The economic impact of the situation in the Middle East will depend, of course, on its severity and its duration. The movements that we have already seen are likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the coming months. But I also want to confirm to the House that our financial markets are functioning, and I'm in regular touch with the Governor of the Bank of England.
The increase in pump prices has been very real. Petrol prices, for example here in Eccles, are up 6p per litre in a week, diesel 11p up, prompting motoring organisations to issue this advice.
At the moment there's no fuel shortage as such, but drivers can save money by cutting out unnecessary journeys and also changing their driving style. If you slow down a bit, check your tyre pressures, you can save about 10% of your fuel.
Ordinary drivers remain concerned.
Probably spend about £500 a month. So if the price does go up, then that's a lot of money out of the monthly income.
And that's gone up that much. Our red has gone up, well, since Friday, 22 pence a litre.
It means it's an extra tenner to fill my tank up. It kind of is what it is. I've got no control over it.
There's basically been a form of economic war at play here. Attacks on energy infrastructure, which were seen yesterday in Iran from Israel, and across the Gulf nations from Iran. Today, the Bahrain authorities reported an attack on a major refinery. And then there is that de facto shutdown of the Straits of Hormuz, with tankers for oil and for gas locked in. Now, this is a comparison. On this day last year, you can see the transit of a fifth of the world's oil and gas to and from. And this is what it looks like today. None of those red triangles are moving through the straits. Ships are at anchor, the red circles there. Trade has stopped. Now, in terms of physical supply, it's Asia that's the most important market for these ships. But the wave of inflation from here washes up everywhere in higher prices. And it really was across the board. These are our data showing spikes since the conflict in a range of commodities, from steel, jet fuel, gas, but also aluminium, wheat, urea, a key precursor for fertiliser and so important for food. All were spiking, some at multi-year highs, but could that now be about to calm down? Oil prices have never had a day as volatile as this. Had the crude oil highs of this morning been maintained, an inflationary shock would have hit the world, Britain and ordinary Americans. The economics of all this might well be why there appears to have been a change of tack. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Well, picking up on that, with higher oil and gas prices, the war does look set to hit the UK economy, with steeper mortgage rates and more expensive food and fuel. The Chancellor's now warning of higher inflation. More than 1.5 million homes are heated by oil, with prices already doubling in the last week. Here's Coletta Smith.
shows us how much oil we've got at any one time or how much is in the tank.
As a teacher, Fran's used to keeping a close eye on a class full of 9-year-olds. But today it's the oil gauge that she's watching.
It was £314, and then within 2-3 days of the conflict starting, it went up to 653. But I've gone on today to have another look.
Due to extremely high demand our suppliers are currently experiencing, we don't have a supplier in your area able to deliver. Check back in with
So
us
even if I
soon.
did have £500, I still couldn't get oil because they're saying nobody can deliver to this area. And obviously I can't do without hot water. I'm not using the heating at all. It's unaffordable. And it's not just people who are on the breadline.
Fran got in touch with us because here in this village, like so many rural areas, they're dependent on oil because they're not connected to the gas network. That means they've been hit hard and fast by those global oil price rises. But however you heat your home, you'll be impacted in the weeks ahead.
Gas and electricity prices are capped in Britain until the start of July, but they will rise then. And higher transport and fertiliser costs are pushing up the price of food and shopping, so prepare to pay more on all your bills. Right now, people from across the UK have contacted BBC Your Voice about those heating oil charges.
I'm going to have to put any oil on a credit card bill and hopefully pay it off over the summer.
It's also an area which is unregulated, unlike the most of utilities like electricity and gas, and this is something that really must be addressed.
The Competition and Markets Authority told us customers who've placed orders for heating oil should receive it at the agreed price, and they'll take action if they suspect competition law is being broken.
There you go, Benny.
This is a warm haven for them here. They have a lovely hot meal.
In Northern Ireland, price rises are affecting a much bigger chunk of the population, as more than half of homes here are heated by oil.
The hike now in the oil heating is horrendous for them. More expense. Also to hand out their pensions. It's a lot of money. A lot of money.
So I have to have it all the time. All the time. And it's expensive.
Do you know what it is? A lot of it's greed. You jump on the bandwagon. One day a thing is £300, the next day it's over £500.
So this is the oil tank.
Yeah. In Cheshire, Fran's rationing what she's using, eking out the last of her tank. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Bunbury.
Let's talk to Chris Mason, who's at Westminster. Chris, the fear for everyone, including the government, is obviously rising inflation, and that hitting the cost of living.
Yes, hello to you, Clive. Precisely that. Just think of what we've all confronted, what recent governments have confronted in just the last few years in terms of price shocks and the cost of living. There was the pandemic, wasn't there? Then there was Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, both with huge consequences and huge domestic economic consequences. And then this. So Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, you saw her briefly a few minutes ago. She was in the House of Commons this afternoon taking questions for over an hour about the government's response to all of this, and a recognition from her of how painful and worrying it is. Something of a watching brief from the government at the moment, and question after question after question, Clive, on that issue of heating oil that Coletta was talking about just there. So much concern for MPs with its geographical focus in many rural parts of Britain, and in particular in Northern Ireland. Tonight the government has written to the industry. Ministers fear that people are being ripped off, frankly. Speaking to folk in the industry tonight, they say, look, we are price takers. Most of the providers do not have significant storage facilities, so they themselves are exposed to rising prices, and they then get passed on to consumers. As far as others are concerned, the government emphasising the price cap for gas and for electricity, that has a handful of months left to run. There could be questions around that into the future if the war does have many weeks ahead of it. Let's see. I think there's a recognition in government of a fundamental. There's a conversation, Clive, you and I have had over and over again in recent years, and it stretches back a decade or more than that. The pressures around the cost of living for so many people, and the fear that this conflict makes those worse.
Indeed, very real pressures. All right, Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there, our political editor at Westminster. Well, the Ministry of Defence says RAF Typhoon jets have been in action here in the Middle East, defending several states from aerial attacks. They shot down a drone heading towards Jordan and another one on its way to Bahrain. The MOD also says HMS Dragon will leave Portsmouth in the next few days, sailing for Cyprus, where a British military base was attacked last week with an Iranian drone. And across Iran, thousands of people have been on the streets celebrating the supreme leader Mujtaba Khamenei following the assassination of his father. And as they cheered, more bombs fell across the land from the US and Israel. Tonight, in an interview with CBS News, Donald Trump said he had no message for Iran's new supreme leader, adding that he had someone else in mind, but wouldn't say whom it was. Here's Lise Doucette, our chief international correspondent.
A show of hands in Tehran to show loyalty to their new leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the last supreme leader assassinated by Israel and America. A son who had worked in his shadow, rarely seen in public. Now his photo is in great supply among government supporters. The enemy will certainly be angry, this woman says, because Khamenei's legacy lives on. In Isfahan, a celebration in its most famous square is suddenly a display of defiance. Allahu Akbar, God is greatest, they cry, as smoke billows in the sky. This was the target, a company linked to Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles program, sanctioned by at least 8 countries, including Britain. 10 days of this war, gut-churning for so many Iranians as hostilities escalate. Some people sent messages to the BBC's Persian service.
There is now a high level of tension between different opinions. Some support the war while others oppose it. We may be the only country where some people are happy about being attacked by 2 foreign powers.
I don't have much hope in the current state of affairs. I see a dark future ahead, because neither side will back down.
With every explosion we hear, part of us feels glad that the corrupt Islamic regime is one step closer to its end. And yet we are worried that our loved ones will make it out of this danger alive.
And the current order still shows no sign of collapse.
We were in the midst of negotiations when this war was forced upon us. Under such circumstances, we can do nothing other than defend ourselves and demonstrate our determination and will to resist. Against the hegemonic ambitions of the United States and the Zionist regime, we can take no other action.
On a second front, tensions spiral. Israeli strikes slammed into this village in southern Lebanon as its war with Iran-backed Hezbollah widens. This resident insists there are only civilians here. They're attacking to make us flee. And today, for a second time, ammunition debris fell on Turkey, Iran's neighbor and a NATO member, after NATO air defenses intercepted a missile fired from Iran. Yet more reminders of the risks as Iran launches attacks on countries nearby to raise the cost of this war. The cost for Iran rises every day. Commanders as well as civilians killed in this vicious contest. Mujtaba Khamenei is also Iran's new commander-in-chief, waging a war to protect this country, wielding force in a fight for this system's survival. Lise Doucette, BBC News.
One of the earliest strikes at the start of the war was on a primary school in the city of Minab in the south of the country. The BBC has verified a video which shows an American missile striking a military base next to the school. Donald Trump has denied US involvement, saying from what he's seen, Iran was responsible. The authorities there say 168 people were killed in the school. Here's Merlin Thomas.
One of the deadliest strikes in Iran was on this primary school in the southern city of Minab on the 28th of February, the first day of the war. Now, a new video has emerged, which gives us a much clearer insight into what happened. We verified this video published by the semi-official Iranian news agency MER. It shows a missile striking an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps base next to the school. We've slowed the video down and zoomed in. Multiple weapons experts have told BBC Verify that this is a US Tomahawk missile. And it's worth saying Israel and Iran do not have Tomahawk missiles. As the camera pans to the right, you can see these large smoke plumes. They're rising above the area near the school, indicating it had been hit shortly before the Tomahawk struck the IRGC base. The missile hit the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps base near the Shajareh Tayyibeh primary school. Neither the US nor Israel have accepted or denied responsibility for the attack. But the new video casts serious doubt on the claim by US President Donald Trump on Saturday that Iran was responsible for the strike on the school. President Trump said, "In my opinion, and based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran. They're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions." But expert analysis of video and satellite evidence suggests that the area came under a wave of US strikes. Experts say this, combined with the verified footage of the significantly damaged school building, makes the scenario of a single Iranian missile landing at the same time as these nearby targeted strikes highly improbable. Funerals were broadcast on Iranian state media last week. Aerial footage showed neatly lined rows of at least 100 marked or freshly dug graves. The incident was one of the deadliest strikes so far, which Iranian authorities say killed 168 people. At BBC Verify, we'll continue to investigate the strike as more evidence emerges.
Merlin Thomas of BBC Verify there. Well, Donald Trump is holding his first press conference since the war in Iran. When asked if the conflict would be over this week, he said no. Let's have a listen in.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to...
soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels of leadership are gone. Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very, very powerful, very effective.
Let's return to Sarah Smith, who's at the White House. He says he thinks the war is now going to be over very soon.
Very soon, but not this week. And you heard him there talking about what he sees as the US success in taking out a lot of the Iranian leadership. He was also talking about the fact that he believes that the Iranian Air Force and Navy have essentially been destroyed as well. So he said we could call it a tremendous success right now, but we could go further and we will go further. So he still thinks there is obviously more to achieve. And he did say that he expected that if he took this action against Iran, that oil prices would rise. And in fact, they hadn't gone up as much as he thought they might, and that he intends to proceed. But I think what we can see here is him setting the stage to be able to declare this conflict over on his own terms and be able to say it is a success, it achieved what he wanted it to. If, for instance, oil prices remained at a sustained high price and he's worried about that, how that might affect support for him here at home, he's, I think, giving us the clues now that at some point, if it becomes politically advantageous, he'll be able to say, I've done what I wanted to in Iran, I can call this over and say it's a great victory.
All right. Thanks again, Sarah. Sarah Smith, our North America editor at the White House. Australia has now granted 5 members of the Iranian women's football team humanitarian visas after they were due to fly back home. The side was knocked out of the Asian Cup, but some of the players feared for their safety after the team declined to sing the national anthem ahead of their first match against South Korea last week. Katie Watson has that story.
Footballers in the spotlight. At yesterday's match, they did sing the national anthem under pressure after being labelled traitors. The players have been heavily guarded throughout this tournament. The Iranian community here in Australia fearful of what might become of them and their families when they return home.
The Iranian women's team are staying in this hotel behind me. There are police outside, security inside, including, I'm told, members of the Iranian government. Now, earlier on Monday, I saw several players talking to Iranian activists in the lobby. Shortly afterwards, they left. It was a highly orchestrated process. At that point, the Australian Federal Police took the players to a safe location.
And then, the moment the delegation realised what had happened, running, panicked to try and find the players who disappeared. to no avail.
We're willing to provide assistance to other women in the team, noting that this is a very delicate situation and it is up to them. But we say to them, if you want our help, help is here.
While some of the team may decide to return to families back home, activists here say they aren't giving up, pushing to help more players make these difficult decisions. Katie Watson, BBC News on the Gold Coast.
That's it from us here in Abu Dhabi, but there's more analysis with Jeremy Bowen and Sarah Smith later in the programme, and Victoria will have more over on Newsnight on BBC Two just after 10:30. Hi there.
Hi, thanks, Clive. Yeah, Donald Trump saying the war in Iran is pretty much complete, then saying the US hasn't won enough yet. What is going on? What does he mean? What is he planning? We'll ask a congressman who spent tonight with the president, and we'll ask Martin Lewis if higher oil prices mean problems for all of us. That's Newsnight at 10:30, live, BBC Two, iPlayer, and around the world on BBC News. See you soon.
Thank you very much. And we will take a look now at a few other stories here tonight. Glasgow Central, the busiest railway station in Scotland, will remain closed until at least tomorrow, following the devastating fire which destroyed a neighbouring Victorian building. The blaze is believed to have started in a vape shop yesterday. ScotRail has said disruption will continue for some days. Katie Hunter reports from the scene.
A Glasgow city centre vape shop yesterday afternoon.
There is a massive fire happening.
People passing tried to help. Among them, Lamin Kunjira, who is attempting to keep people back.
See, that's me, grab him, go.
He says he did what he could to help.
First explosion comes from the shop. That's when the first explosion comes, that's when I see that there's no way I can do. The only thing I can do now is to save the lives. So that the way I can do that is to block the road. So that's why I decided to block the road until the first fire engine comes.
Within hours, this listed Victorian building was engulfed. People watched on as it continued to collapse.
Seeing such an important part of Glasgow's history falling apart because of a vape shop fire, it just pains me.
It's such an important part of the city centre. When you come in, you see it immediately, and I think it's just going to make a massive impact on the whole city centre.
In total, more than 250 firefighters have been here since yesterday afternoon. This shows the building before the fire. This is what's left. No one was hurt, but a number of businesses have been destroyed.
Everything's gone. Absolutely everything. All of our stock, all of our equipment, our furniture, art that we'd collected to decorate the place. We've just lost absolutely everything.
This footage shows the empty tracks leading into Glasgow Central Station and the nearby smoke. It's expected to be closed until at least Wednesday.
It's clear that the station is not opening today, it's not opening tomorrow, and work will be undertaken to resume services as quickly as possible, but there are significant safety challenges that have got to be overcome.
Firefighters continued to cool off hotspots into this evening.
The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service says it's too soon to speculate on the cause, and an investigation is underway. What we do know is there's likely to be some disruption here in the city centre for some time to come. Katie Hunter, BBC News, Glasgow.
The King has described the Commonwealth as a force for unity in a fragmented world in a message at the annual Commonwealth Day service in London. The King and Queen were met with booing and shouting from about 30 anti-monarchy protesters as they arrived at Westminster Abbey. It was the biggest gathering of senior royals since the arrest of the King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, as promised, let's just bring you some closing thoughts about our main story tonight, the continuing Iran war, of course. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, is here, and you've been listening as well to President Trump in the last hour. What do his comments tell us, do you think, about the war, where it is tonight?
According to him, it's going brilliantly, much better than anyone ever expected, that they've got to a stage where they weren't sure they'd even get to a month in. So, of course, does that mean that he's preparing the ground to declare victory, as Sarah was suggesting? I would absolutely agree with her analysis. That's certainly what it sounded like to me. Yes, they'll go on a bit more, but he can see the closing shot in the reel, if you like, coming towards him, the great victory. The problem with wars, though, is that there are two parties in it, and wars don't necessarily end if one party wants it to end. the Iranians might want to continue it, because what you're seeing there, and you can almost hear the grinding of gears at the moment in this, because first of all, the Americans preparing for that stage, perhaps Trump, but the Iranians doubling down on a sense of resistance, of continuity. The new supreme leader, the son of the old supreme leader, a man who was part of a lot of the big decisions made over 30 years, certainly stands for continuity, defiance, animosity against the United States, don't forget, and Israel. Don't forget his parents and his wife were killed in that hit as well. He's also a human being. And I think what we've also seen, which is really interesting, really big crowds celebrating his appointment as supreme leader, which suggests that that sense of resistance, certainly among regime followers, is getting harder. Aerial bombing tends to do that to populations. So, you know, the scene is set. Is it going to be the end game? Donald Trump hopes it might be. But for the Iranian regime, if they're there at the end of it, they'll say they've won.